Oh my gosh.
I hate it when they have these things. Oh my gosh.
I heard. Okay, so we
Did you press verify? 'Cause it's
no, not
good.
yet,
Oh.
not yet, because I'm going to say something. So we're excuse me, we're doing the pre-show right now, and for some reason, I'm not. I logged into Restream, which is what we use to actually send the video stream to Facebook and YouTube. But I went to the chat window, and I had to sign in again, and it wants me to verify the images, which
I
is
hate those images though.
okay because they're hard, right? They're hard.
They
You want to
are
hear?
sometimes.
You want to hear something that I? Is it going to let me sign in? Okay, good. So, do you want to hear something that is it working?
I don't know.
It says it's working. I'm not sure why it's not showing up on Restream. I might just refresh it. Anyways, so the theory that I heard that I actually find pretty believable
Yeah.
is that whatever company creates those is using that to train autonomous vehicles to be able to recognize.
Like stoplights and.
Yeah,
Because
and
there are some that are like, click all the pictures with stoplights, and you see like, some of them have them like way in the distance, where you're like,
Yeah.
I think there's one there.
so think about it as like you're trying to train something to drive without a human and to be able to recognize those
Yeah.
things. Like being able to recognize the obvious ones, that's easy.
Yeah.
But to recognize the ones that are kind of blurry or like, oh, it might be, I don't know,
Yeah.
like being able to tell the difference. So I heard that and I was like, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Who knows?
Yeah.
I just know those things really bug me.
Uh,
Sometimes I have to do them twice because I fail the first time.
Yeah. So it's training
Yeah.
AI. You want to talk about AI today?
No.
I'm just kidding. All right. Well, let's go ahead and dive into the show. Short pre-show today. We're running a little bit late, so we are going to get it going.
All right.
Nope, that's not it.
Mm-hmm.
Here we go. Hello and welcome to In the Boat with Ben and Rachel. I'm Ben.
And I'm Rachel.
And this podcast exists to address common creator struggles and provide weekly inspiration for your creator journey. Today, we are talking about the role of self-discipline in creative work.
Yep.
Does it play a role? Is that what creativity is? So in the description that I wrote for this, I actually kind of posed it as when you think about creativity, certain words come to mind like freedom and flow and fun. And I was proud of myself for coming up with that because that's an alliteration.
Yeah.
Yep. So, but kind of just that laid back sort of, creativity. It's about removing restraints and it's about having the freedom to explore and
whenever
try
the news
things
strikes
and,
you.
Yeah. So the idea that self-discipline might play a role in creativity feels a little bit antithetical. Spoiler alert, it's actually not.
Mm-hmm.
And but I also think it's a little bit complicated. So I feel like that's where the meat of our conversation, for lack of a better metaphor, is going to come from. So, but your take on the role of self-discipline and creativity, because I know that you have a pretty strongly held belief about that.
I mean, I think that everybody is creative and everybody can do creative work, but I also think that you won't get very far in a creative career without self-discipline.
Mm-hmm. So what does that look like practically speaking?
Self-discipline?
Mm-hmm.
It looks like every day at 10 o'clock, I log on with a bunch of writers, and we write from 10 until 11:30 every single day.
What if you don't feel like it?
That's not an excuse.
What if what if you don't what if no ideas come to you?
That's also not an excuse. You get on there. Sometimes other writers get on there and they get barely anything done, but they get maybe a sentence. And then it's like, yeah, that's still progress.
Yeah.
But if you allow yourself the excuse of, oh, no ideas are coming, then that becomes easier and easier to use as your excuse.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that.
If you open up, that's just the way that I see it. I think that, I mean, the biggest advice that other writers give writers is butt in the chair. Like, I mean, I don't sit in a chair, I stand at a desk, but it's the same concept. Like,
Yeah.
the only way you're going to get that creative work done is by doing it and doing it consistently.
So there is like, I want to kind of tease out these different ideas and get the terminology right, because what you're describing sounds a little bit like, part of it to me sounds a little bit like routine and schedule, and I think that is a tool that you can use for
I don't think
your
it has to be at the
creativity.
same time every day. I think if you make, you say, I'm going to write for an hour every day, and it can change when that is, but you still need to get your hour in, even if it's like crap words.
Yeah. So what I'm taking it to mean when you're in the scenario that you're describing is making the decision, self-discipline in that situation, because that's what we're focused on. Self-discipline is making the decision to show up despite or regardless of how
Any
you
excuses you might make for yourself,
Right.
or how you feel or anything like that. And I will be clear, like I write Monday through Friday. I don't spend from 10 o'clock to 11:30 with my writer friends Saturdays and Sundays. So, there is room to take time off, but having the consistency of that every single workday is really valuable for creative people, I think.
Yeah. So let's come at it from maybe try to come at it from sort of an empathetic angle. I'm someone who struggles with self-discipline in a lot of different areas of my life, and
Yeah.
so creativity has not escaped my lack of self-discipline, my tendency to have a lack of self-discipline. Some of that does come from the way that my brain works. I'm kind of self-diagnosed as having ADHD. I finally scheduled.
Well, I mean, it's like we have children who have ADHD, and I don't have ADHD, so
It had to come from somewhere.
It's hereditary.
So I'm going to. I finally scheduled an appointment with a doctor.
Yeah.
I saw a funny thing, by the way. Speaking of ADHD, I'm going to go off on and chase a rabbit trail.
Exactly.
There was a video, and it was like ADHD memes or whatever. But basically, the story was this person was going to see the doctor to determine whether or not they had ADHD, and they had to reschedule the appointment 3 different times because they missed it. They were late to the appointment, and then they over-explained why they were late, and those are like, so it's kind of like, and then the doctor was like, yeah, you have it.
Yeah. I don't even need to do a test.
Right. So anyways, all that to say, I don't think of that as an excuse. I think that there is a reality that for a person whose brain works that way, self-discipline doesn't seem to come as naturally.
So I think I'm just going to interject here and say that there is a writer in our writers group who does have ADHD,
Mm-hmm.
and what he says has been really good for him is having that consistency. Like every day, he's there from 11. I mean, from 10 to 11:30 on the days that he can make it. He's doing other stuff right now, but it helps him to have that consistency. And then it also, he works on multiple projects during the time. So it's not just like for an hour and a half, he's working on one thing. So I think there are ways that you can work with the way that your brain works in
Oh,
order to have that
absolutely.
consistency and.
Yeah. So I think my point was, especially for people who have that kind of
Mm-hmm.
struggle, it's not quite as simple as, hey, you just have to make a decision and show up.
Yeah.
Um,
I think you have to put things in place that will make you make that decision, if that makes sense.
yeah. So absolutely, there's a mentor of mine who, I'm going to go ahead and pause here for a second because, as you know, like clockwork, the
The trash people.
yeah, and you may not be able to hear it, but just in case it's bleeding through, so we will we'll pause recording and talking about the subject. It's a little bit warm in here, isn't it?
Do you see me like sweating? Is that
Let
why you
me
said it?
let me see if you can see it on camera. Oh, look at that. Yeah.
Oh,
No, I'm just
dang.
kidding. No, you're fine.
I
Um,
know.
I'll share this because it was funny. But I turned the camera on and we were like adjusting stuff, and I said my hair is out of control, and this was before we started recording, and so I went to start recording, and we record in a program that transcribes it at the same time, like in real time. It's transcribing right now, which is super cool. Um, and so I open it up, and it actually opened on last week's recording.
Mm-hmm.
And in last week's recording, the very first thing I said when I hit record was, my hair is out of control.
It was like same words.
Yeah. I need to, I don't know, I should get a haircut maybe. It's kind of an experiment. Like, I used to have long curly hair at times. Like, I've kind of gone back and forth. And now that I'm starting to gray a little bit. I'm curious. I'm curious about what it looks like to have long hair, but also be graying. I don't know. But it is very unmanageable, and it's not the kind of like tight,
Yeah.
pretty
It
curls.
grows out,
It's
not.
just like frizzy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
They're still working on the trash out there.
It's been a lot of trash
I
today.
guess. Are they driving away now? No, no, they're not. I think they just decided to park out there and
No,
hang
I
out.
think they drove away now.
Oh, okay, good.
There we go.
Okay, so what were we talking about? So there's a mentor of mine shared this idea with me, and this was really before like we were having wider conversations about neurodiversity and ADHD and things like that. It was more of it was kind of more understood as like, oh, it's my personality is I'm not a very disciplined
Mm-hmm.
person. And so he put it in a way that helped me really kind of in some ways feel better about that, because where you lack self-discipline, you can add structure.
Mm-hmm.
Some things, and so like I think I think self-discipline is something that you can develop and foster, but I think your capacity for self-discipline is in a lot of ways limited by your neurology. And so when and it's a lot more work to develop self-discipline for something than it is to build structures around it, to make sure that you do that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And those structures come in many forms. It can be, you're meeting with a group, and so there's some kind of accountability.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it can be some, reward that you promise yourself if you do the thing. Or, it could be thinking about thinking enough about the negative effects of not doing that thing that you start to feel motivated. Um, yeah. So,
Or maybe the positive effects of.
well, I was doing the opposite. There's like
Yeah.
the reward. Yeah, like the positive
I don't
effects
know
too.
about the negative. I don't like thinking about the negative things, but
Yeah, if you're an anxious person, that's probably not a great strategy.
what are all the things that could go wrong if I don't do this?
Yeah.
My brain has a lot of things that could go wrong.
Yeah, I guess so. What happens to me in that scenario is I freeze.
Yeah.
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 Uh, yeah. So maybe don't do that. So, so I don't know. Like I'm kind of on the fence about this idea of self discipline because while I do think it is something you can develop, and I think it's something that's healthy, like it's good and healthy for a person to exercise self discipline, I also want to be careful, which I feel like we've kind of done, addressing the reality that self discipline can come more easily for some than others, and that it's more complicated than just saying, okay, I'm going to make a commitment and I'm going to decide to show up. And and
Yeah,
so
I think the wider conversation is just be, how do you fit self-discipline into creative work, because like any attribute or characteristic of ourselves, self-discipline can also be taken to an extreme.
mhm.
I mean, I've fallen into the self-discipline extremes occasionally, and even now have a hard time stepping away from the self-discipline. Like when we're on vacation, I'm very self-disciplined about food, and then we go on vacation and I have a really really hard time just like
letting
eating
yeah.
out all the time.
And I have the opposite
Yeah.
problem. I go on vacation, I'm like, all right, anything
It's all the
goes.
things.
And
Yeah.
then I come back from vacation and my brain's still like, anything goes, right? Like, no, we're back on the
Yeah.
okay, yeah, we'll see.
So I think the conversation that needs to happen in ourselves, and even here on the show, is just what is the role that self-discipline plays for me?
Yeah. Well, okay, so and I'm glad you kind of took it in that direction. I think it's important to whether that's through self-reflection or talking to others, but but to really get a sense of like what is my capacity for self-discipline, and how disciplined of a person am I, and then accepting where you are on that spectrum.
Well, and here's the thing too, it changes according to the seasons of life. I mean, our brains only have a certain capacity for discipline. And sometimes when we're going through a difficult parenting season or something, our discipline is like all used up for
Yeah.
trying to speak to our children gently, and those kinds of things. And so the seasons change, and sometimes we're in a better place where we can exhibit more self-discipline than we were a year ago. Or
Yeah, like you've only, I mean, maybe this is kind of an easier way to think about it. Your piggy bank for self-discipline is um it's like whatever size it
mm,
happens to be. Yours is bigger than mine.
maybe,
Um
I don't know.
and and you can through exercising self-discipline, you can increase the capacity of
Mm-hmm.
that piggy bank, but only, like only so much. I'd have to work a lot harder to increase the capacity of for my self-discipline than you'd have to.
Yeah.
And so it's a piggy bank full of coins. And if you are a parent of young children and you're in a stressful work situation and you're having interpersonal issues with friends or family, and your neighbor's a jerk, like a, a bunch of you end up spending, because you're trying to be a kind person. You're trying to speak kindly to your children and raise them and take care of them in a season of their life where they're, rightly only focused on their own needs. Um, you're trying to be a good son or daughter to your parents and maintain those relationships while also setting, like, you're doing all of this work that requires self-discipline, and so you're just spending those coins so that, and and the order of priority, like, by the time it gets to the thing that you want to do, like, you've already spent a lot of it at that point. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think that's also an important way to think about it, and something to kind of check in on, because if you sit down to do something and you're really struggling to maintain self-discipline, and you start beating yourself up, it's like, what, I'm never, like, I never have this much trouble just getting started on something. What's wrong with me? um I think it's worth, like, looking at how the other ways you might have been spending those coins.
Yeah. I mean, I know that 5 years ago, my capacity for self-discipline in creative work was pretty low because we had such young children and there were so many needs, and there was just it was just a lot.
Well, yeah,
it was a lot.
You were spending all of those coins. And so part of it might be to think about, okay, as I prioritize how I spend my self-discipline, are there things that I could reprioritize so that I save some of that willpower and that and the energy for my creative work?
Yeah.
So I think that's a good question to ask.
Well, and I will say too that creative work, because it's so inherent in our nature and because it's so enjoyable most of the time, can help increase our capacity. It's almost like a little cycle thing where, like, the more you practice self-discipline for creative work, the more self-discipline you have available, because it kind of fills your cup a little bit,
So I think there's some nuance there related to different aspects of the work that you're doing. So, for example, you love writing.
Yeah.
You could go the rest of your life without ever having to write another description.
True. Yeah.
But that's a part of the creative work, and so it takes self-discipline to do. So it takes more self-discipline to do certain parts of it.
I usually only
others.
do it if somebody needs it from me.
I want to zoom out and I guess answer the question and see if maybe you agree with me. I think the real role of self-discipline in creativity is in anything that we do, there's always going to be some part of it that we don't feel like doing, but that is necessary in order to create the thing that we have a vision for. There are seasons in our lives when, if we don't sit down and write or sit down and illustrate or work on whatever it is, then we miss out on those opportunities to create something. And so self-discipline in those scenarios is more like, okay, we're making creativity possible by showing up. And so I think that pretty much encapsulates the role of self-discipline in creativity and the value of it.
Yeah. Well, and I do want to add this too. I'm coming into a really busy season with a book launch and author appearances and things like that. And I can feel my self-discipline for actually creating the books slipping a little bit. But because I have those routines and things in place, it feels weird to me not to, sit down or stand up at my computer and write, which I feel like helps a lot
Yeah.
because
So
it's become almost a habit, no longer even self-discipline. It's just like, oh, this is just what I do every day.
right, and that's actually so like what I might attribute to your personal self discipline might actually be that you just have done a good job of
Creating the habit.
creating habits and
Mm-hmm.
building that structure for yourself so that you don't have to exercise a lot of
Mm-hmm.
self-discipline when you sit down to work. So
Yeah.
I think that's a really good takeaway
Yeah.
also.
Yeah.
For someone who's like me, who struggles with self-discipline, and I've got a backlist of projects that I keep saying I want to, I want to work on this.
Yeah.
I have time in my schedule set aside on the uh, this album that I've been talking about working on forever,
Mm-hmm.
on Friday afternoons, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to miss that date with myself again today.
Yeah.
Like because things keep coming up. Um, it's incredibly frustrating. What are some steps someone and I think I kind of know the answer to this for myself, but what are some steps you would recommend to take in order to put the structures in place that would make it possible to actually start working on those things?
I mean, the very first step I would say is don't try to put too many in place at once, because I think that's sometimes what people do is they and I've seen you do it before where you're like, I'm going to change all of these things, but just choose one to change. If you want to make that date with yourself on Fridays, then make the date and don't let anything encroach on it, and find other times to do these things that crop up. I mean, I don't know exactly what you're talking about with them cropping up. It could be emergencies, or find another day that doesn't have as many
Yeah.
things that crop up. So I would say like focus on one thing at a time until it becomes more of a habit than it is, a new thing for you kind of thing.
Yeah. So the one of the things you said was, and when I talk about things cropping up,
Mm-hmm.
they're things that I'm already committed to in some way that
They crop up at that particular time.
yeah, and I don't, I guess the thing that I need to deal with, this is like really really specific to me, but maybe it can help you too, is that I haven't there's a segment of my time that I'm thinking of as like, oh, I could use that to work on music, but also in my mind is this idea that that is work time technically.
Hmm.
It doesn't have to be, but I think I haven't allowed myself to feel free from work. And in the order of priority, other things, like things that come up with my work time gets interrupted all the time, and I just kind of redistribute it
Yeah.
elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Other things that interrupt my work time are family related things. So maybe I
Mm-hmm.
need to run to the store to pick something up, or go pick up dinner, or somebody needs a ride home from school because they stayed after for tutoring.
Mm-hmm.
And so I need to go to the sources of all of those things and say I'm putting a boundary here.
Yeah. Boundaries are important.
and and that doesn't mean that I'm absolutely not available,
Mm-hmm.
but I need you to know about this boundary so that
Yeah.
when you think to ask me for something, or when something comes up, you and for example, like you think to yourself, oh no, this is his, you know, hour of sitting down and writing music. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
figure something else
Yeah.
out. Or the kids are like, oh, I can't, if I want to stay after for tutoring, I need to ask mama about it first and see if she can come pick me up.
Yeah.
So just like that's that's a step that I just haven't taken to
Mm-hmm.
protect that time. And that's just like one of many things I could do to ensure that that happens.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's also a step of time management as well, because any places that we're wasting time on things like social media
Or
are,
researching the latest developments in artificial
yeah,
intelligence.
like you even admitted this week that you kind of went down a rabbit hole, and so protecting yourself against those kinds of things too, that are like you don't even realize how much time you lose with that, and that could be times that you make doctor's appointments or some of these other things that are encroaching on. I mean, that's what I do. Like if I have a 20-minute lunch, I'm like on the phone making doctor's appointments and all of that, because I know that there's no other, I'm not going to use my work time to do that.
Well, yeah. But see, like I've been in that situation and I know I know what my brain does.
Yeah. I mean, it
And
takes planning, I
it's
guess. That's a,
well, no, it's like if I've been successful in putting something in my schedule and saying I'm going to use this time. I think you touched on something important there. If it's if I suddenly find 20 extra minutes in my schedule because I finished something early,
mm-hmm.
I'm not going to do something productive with that time.
Yeah.
Like there might be a really tiny part of my brain that's like, "Hey, you should schedule doctor's appointments and do something responsible."
Yeah.
And the much bigger I like the dominant part of my brain's like, "All right, it's time to scroll on social media. Get out of here."
Yeah.
So anyways,
I mean, honestly, sometimes I wish I could turn it off, because like I would like to relax every now and then, but
he's such a little guy in there, that responsible, like he's fighting for his life, trying to
yeah.
get me to take care of stuff. And I commend him because I've actually been I think I've been a pretty successful adult living with ADHD and like
Yeah.
still managing to take care of things.
Yeah.
Way to go, little guy.
Oh man.
All right, I think we can wrap this up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the ability to commit to and choose to do something that you don't feel like doing is a very valuable skill. And in the absence of the motivation or like the feeling that you can do that, I think it's good to look at other strategies and structures you can put in place to make that happen. Because the things that you want to create, that you want to get out into the world, they're worth your time.
Mm-hmm.
And they, I think it's worth the discomfort of sitting down and when you don't feel like it. And what ends up happening, as soon as you get started, it starts to feel easier. You get that momentum.
Yeah, there's less resistance for
Yeah.
any of the things. And in the writing world, we say if you just write a page a day, which is not very much, it's like 350 words, you have a book at the end of that year.
Yeah.
So if you think about it that way, and the little things, how they accumulate, it's, I don't know, maybe it's a little bit easier to bring that discipline and consistency to the table.
Yeah, that's a strategy we didn't really highlight, but I think is extremely important, because I think especially for people who procrastinate,
Mm-hmm.
they feel like they have to eat the whole meal
Yeah.
at once. Like put the whole thing in your mouth and swallow it whole without chewing.
Yeah.
And it's really just like what's the one bite that I can get myself to sit down and take out of this thing.
Yeah.
And if that's all that happens, if all that happens is you sit down and write a paragraph, or all that happens is you sit down and sketch out a concept, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is, that's worth it.
Yeah, my first published book, was written in 15 minutes a day for a year.
Mm-hmm.
So it can happen.
That's right. All right, Rachel, where can people go to find you online?
RachelTolson.com, and I'm at Rachel Tolson on all the things.
And I'm at bentolson.com and also at bentolson on all of the things. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this. This is an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
I love these kind of topics, but I also hate them because they highlight, like you and I are very different.
Very different people.
But
we've been married almost 20 years, so something about it works.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. Knock on wood.
Wow.
I'm not superstitious.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I hope that kind of the differing perspectives.
Yeah, is helpful.
Yeah. All right.
I wouldn't want to listen to a podcast just from me.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, if it was just me, I mean, that's why I tried it. I tried to start this podcast again, just myself. And I was like, yeah this isn't going to work.
Yeah, doesn't work.
Okay. Thanks for listening, and we will talk to you next time. All right, quick after show.
Yep.
Cody says, your piggy bank for self-discipline sounds a lot like spoon theory. And that's, I don't know why I didn't.
Yeah.
I don't, piggy bank was the first thing that came to my mind, but it's basically the same thing. Like you only have so many spoons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's another thing with like, isn't that why? Is it the Amazon guy who wears the same thing every day?
No, that's Mark Zuckerberg.
Oh, okay. So
or allegedly,
taking away one of the decisions in your day because you have so many decisions to make. I mean, I feel like that comes into self-discipline too, because you have to make the decision to create and have that time that you create. So, I wear the same thing every day most of the time, unless there's a reporter coming to do a story about me or something and I have to dress up. But I eliminate that whole step of, I just wear workout clothes.
It's really interesting. Like if you think about it, how the way if you think about the way humans work, and really like most living things are about energy conservation.
Yeah. And
that extrapolates into our habits. Like the reason we develop habits, it's a energy saving mechanism because it takes a lot more processing energy to make a decision of whether or not to do something than to just follow a cue.
Yeah.
And so I find that super interesting. And so then you can look at your life and you can see, oh yeah, I do that because it's easier to do that than to, like do the harder version of that or whatever.
Yeah.
Or I do that, which is something that is hard for other people, but it's because it gives me energy. So really, really interesting stuff. All right. We're going to sign off. Thanks again for tuning in.
All right.
And we'll see you next time.